Narayana, 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 Narayana. In the second section of the sixth chapter, having said Murtiketyeva Satyam or Lohamityeva Satyam, Karshnaya Satyam, etc., that there is always an essential material or essence in every objects, variety of objects, and that is our focus. Here there is actually an interesting point. Are we going to somehow show three different clay parts and say from these three different clay parts with different names and different shapes, if you are able to get rid of the name and shape, what you arrive at is the clay? This is one method of pointing to the clay. Because if I were to show these three parts to an ignorant man, a child, as you say, for example, who cannot think about clay, but he can differentiate three different shapes and three different names, association. And you inculcate in that child somehow that you just don't bother about different names. Don't bother about different shapes. You drop them. What remains and what you are able to see at that time, which is not going to come about newly. It has always been there in front of you. That is the real vastu called clay. Then the child knows, oh, this is clay. Similarly, if a person is given three different ornaments of different shapes with three different names, the focus is not on what is the source material of which this is made. So you tell them, you leave the shape of a ring or a nose ring or a ear ring or a bangle or an anklet or a chain. Forget about the shape and the name. What remains is really gold. That's what matters. That's what is giving you the value. Then you recognize the gold as the valuable thing, not the name. Name is just a name. So am I going to go from the variety to the non-dual or from the non-dual to the variety? So there can be two prakriyas. So if you are Veda, for example, in the next section, Uddalaka starts from the statement saying Sadeva Saumyedamagre Asid. Sadeva Saumyedamagre Asid. Satyeva Agre Asid Somya. Oh my dear, Agre, in the beginning, to start with, only Sat Padartha was there. Only existence is there. So Sat need not be said to be existence alone, though that is the approximate one, because the same Sat Padartha is also having Ananda, the same Sat Padartha is also knowingness. So Sat is not really to say existence alone. Existence is one of them. You may pick up the word existence or knowingness or with respect to Ananda and identify the same vastu. So there are different Vedic texts, Vedic methodologies, stories, narratives, trying to make one understand that oneness, that one source, trying to approach from these three different lakshana. For example, Ananda Dhyeva Kalvimani Bhutani Jayante. So in that sentence, Ananda is emphasized. From that all these beings are born, it is said. Here it is saying, Sadeva Somyedamagra Asid. Now, he is trying to start from the source material and then show the devolution. Maybe I should say evolution into the variety. Even in the Devi worship, there is a Sushti Krama and Upasamhara Krama. So you may start from the one source and then come to the variety. Panchabhuta, Panchabhuta, Panchikarana, Panchikarana, Vyakrutavan, Vyakrata. Or you can go the other way, Upasamhara, by merging the variety into one higher level, then merging them into one higher level and come to the Bindu. So here Sadeva Somyedam Agra Asid, he comes from top to the variety. After 7, 8 sections, I believe, there is a slight difference in that. Let me look at... there is a slight change in the tone. In the methodology, there is a slight difference that comes. Oh, okay, I think I am confusing myself. In the 8th Khanda. In the 8th Khanda, there is a slight difference in the approach. Tadhasya vijagna, vijagna vidhi. So that happens. This is that concludes in the 7th Khanda, and from 8th Khanda there is a slight difference in the approach. But whatever may be, the goal is primarily to inculcate the source. I will put a stop to this idea there, and then I wanted to read out 1 or 2 sentences. Yesterday when I was trying to explain, I could not directly refer to those sentences from the Tathagata Garbha Tathagata Garbha literature. So I thought I will just read out. For example, I am looking at some page number 46 in this book. You may not be able to refer to it, but still. There is some narrative story given about methodology. And then there is a paragraph which is, likewise, good sons, for the sake of leading and maturing sentient beings, the Tathagata first taught to them the mental cultivation of absence of self in regard to all phenomena. When they mentally cultivate absence of self, they eliminate any erroneous view of the self. Having eliminated any view of the self, they enter into nirvana. In order to remove notions of the worldly self, I taught the strategic, cryptic teaching that negates the self. After that, I teach to them the nature of Tathagata, nature of Buddha nature, which is the supermundane, supreme self. So here it is presented because Buddha obviously knew what is called as a self in the Vedic Brahmanic tradition, that there is an individual self which is referred as Atma, which is Agamapai. He keeps changing, traveling between different worlds, experiencing the results of punya and papa. This is the very well ingrained notion of a self in all the people. It is so surprising that in spite of all these debates, not only because of Buddhism, but even because of the Vedic tradition itself, from the Samhita to Brahmana portion to Aranyaka and Upanishads, where the thought has changed from a doer karta to a non-doer karta. Upanishads have talked about so much. A few centuries at least before Buddha's arrival itself, the Brihadaranyaka and Chandogya existed. Meaning these mantras existed by then, by the time of Buddha. So the Chandogya mantras existed before Buddha. But it is so surprising, he did not get to hear them and comment about them or use them for his own discovery. He didn't have teachers who taught him this view. The ascetics of the time did not know how to explain these Chandogya mantras. As we know, even today, there are ritualistic people who denounce the Upanishadic teachings. So it is probably not a wonder that this penetrative thought of one self of all, even though recorded in many schools of the Brahmanas, Chandogya, and also the Brihadaranyaka existed at the time, the explanations were not with the common population and not even with the scholars. It is a very surprising thing. So here Buddha is saying, based on whatever people are talking about the empirical worldly self, which I could not accept, I wanted to dislodge that. So I talked about no self. So that first of all they come out of that wrong notion. Having come out of that, being free from the burden of being a karta bhokta, when the people are able to experience freedom from sorrow, are able to experience joy, when they experience cessation of all the three primary causes, avidya, kama, and moha. Ignorance, desire, and delusion. When they are able to come out of that, then I want to really tell them that there is one self of all, the Tathagata Garbha, or the Buddha nature, Buddha Dhatu, which cannot be called as a self by any individual. Because in that one, there is no notion of an individual. That is the final source. And everybody is that. You can also become a Buddha. To indicate that every common man can become, in the sense of coming to know that he is the source, she is the source of that, the Buddha nature, the Atma nature is in everybody. It is said in that sense by all the Vedic sages. But somehow these two did not come together to a resolution. Unfortunate. But now that we know that there existed literature of this kind, which went out of currency in India at that time and went to China, and now we are translating them back into English and Indian languages from Tibetan and Chinese, we know that the ultimate result that is desired by both these methods of teaching is the same. I would also see one or two more sentences in the same trend. Moreover, that which can be called the self is not any erroneous, worldly notion of selfhood found in the non-Buddhist discourse. Despite the fact that the Buddha was required to teach about absence of self in order to dismiss forms of Atmavadan teaching already prevalent in the world. Because this Atma idea existed much before. Buddha himself must have gone through learning some Vedas because he was also a Kshatriya, and at that time they were permitted to learn. They learned. This relationship between Buddhist and non-Buddhist teaching about the self is a particularly tricky issue with which the Parinirvana Mahasutra deals in its final exposition of Buddha nature and to what it does and moreover does not refer. So, the Mahaparinirvana Mahasutra, which is the last discourse, which is last recorded discourse of the Buddha, because that was his final lecture or teaching before he left the body. So, and in that, these details about clarity about the one self of all is given. We need to reconcile between the Anatmavadim teaching to counter the Atmavadim teaching of the Vedic seers, Vedic methodology, and of course Brahman of the Upanishads, equivalent to the Buddha Dhatu or Buddha Kaya or Dharma Kaya or Tathagata Garbha. So this is about some important things we need to know so that we can continue with how to go about undoing this practice of Nama Rupa is to be disregarded. You cannot disregard, you cannot keep on breaking every part to come to know clay. So, even in this world made of these Panchabhutas, for example, we see the word Panchikaranam, means fivefold, etc. And in the Chandogya, it refers to Trivrit Karanam. It only takes 3 items and then these 3 intermixing. So they call Trivrit Karanam, Panchikaranam and Trivrit Karanam. So our commitment is not really to either Panchikaranam or Trivrit Karanam. Our goal is to know that one source has become manifold. And we are interested in that one, not this manifold or variety. So the teaching is to lead from the manifold nature into that one by telling that one has become many and that one has entered into many, so that is you. Because that is what entered. That's what you are calling I. So that method is adopted. So the idea, for example, as I was saying, the Diamond Sutra teaches a story or a narrative to present to you this contemplative method of how to come to know that non-dual with different paradoxical statements. Like we are saying, you have variety of parts but disregard the shape and come to know the clay. So when somebody is able to really drop the shape and name, they are in direct contact with clay. There is no more doing after that. The same approach Buddha also takes. For example, in the Vedic teaching, we say Adhyaropa Apavada. You superimpose something and take away that, revealing what has already been there. Saying, let us say we want to point out to space and say this is space. There is nothing to see there. There is no possibility of objectification to which I am used to. So space cannot be made to be understood by somebody by saying this is space. But if I were to keep a book there and say, look, here is a book, and the attention goes to the place where there is a book, and then you take away the book and say, now I removed the book. Where there was a book earlier and now it is not there, that is space. So now what is unobjectifiable becomes objectified. There is an imagination created in the mind now, a concept grasped in the mind about the notion of space. Without this example of keeping a book there and removing, our mind would not focus to that emptiness, which is called space. But what we are trying to focus here is something which is going to be behind even the space. To be able to do that, if I were to start from all the Panchabhutas and then remove them, then what remains is only the knowingness. And then the teacher says that you are. In which, if I am able to really come to that spot where I am able to remove all the objectified objects, what remains is the one illuminating those objects, and that is myself. Adhyaropa apavada. In that Sat Padartha, Uddalaka starts describing variety of objects evolving, and he brings us to realize this manifest world to which we are very familiar, with which we are very familiar. And then he says, you see, all this variety came from that Sat Padartha alone, which is you. So this is the Apavada. Evolution and devolution in the sense of negation. That Namarupa is to be negated. And then bring you to the attention of that one self of all. Of course, this will become fruitful only when somebody is able to disengage with this love affair with this Nama and Rupa. Very objective, very intellectually honest approach, even if it is temporary. To come to know myself as I am before this evolution of this prapancha, pancha. This is a Vedic method. Bhagavan Buddha also does the same thing by trying to use paradoxical statements to reveal. And in this Diamond Sutra, Subhuti is taught, end of which he says, Bhagavan, today I have a vision which I didn't have earlier. Glory to your teaching. Now I have an understanding of that source devoid of Namarupa. So that is encompassed in this Diamond Sutra. In our next session, we will do a quick reading. I just want to familiarize some of you who may be listening to this or who would listen to this teaching. I know that these books are available everywhere in the world, but because of lack of awareness, then somebody may not make an effort to read it. So to take this chance that somebody may benefit, I would try and read them. Since I am not a Chinese scholar or Sanskrit scholar, I would just be reading the English, and I will limit my comments also on that, so that we are able to complete it quickly. So we will wait for the next session. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat Sarvam Sri Krishnarpanamastu Sri Buddha Charanarpanamastu.